The day after Trump was elected, a lot of the conversations I was having teetered on a sort of emotional edge. I mean, even just talking about homework or class, it felt like somebody would be holding back tears. And I worked with an organization at the time called the Black President's Council to put together this emergency meeting for all of these Black and brown students who were hurting, to come together in what I thought was essentially mourning. And for a while, we sat in that room and we just took turns trying to unpack and understand what had happened and why. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us in this room can remember that general fear of what a Trump presidency might mean for this country. But for us, it was really personal. It was because we were afraid of what would happen to our parents and our families. I mean, people told stories of calling their little siblings in elementary school to make sure that they were safe. One girl shared not knowing if she would ever see her grandmother again because she was in Mexico and they didn't know if she'd be able to cross the border again. And we were also afraid for ourselves as students of color at a predominantly white institution. So at a certain point, though, the energy in that room changed, and we weren't just there for grief or mourning anymore. When the tears stopped, and suddenly we were organizing and supporting each other, it was as if just being together in that space and knowing that each of us shared this experience was its own kind of empowerment. And at that moment, we needed a community. And for one of the first times in my years at Texas State, I really felt like there was one. But just as the mood shifted, the person who helped us book the room tapped my arm and let me know that our time was nearly up. A predominantly white fraternity had a chapter meeting, and this space that we had borrowed for healing now had to be returned. Now, when I first spent much of my time at Texas State, I worked with an organization that I founded called the Pan-African Action Committee around the need for Black studies and other issues of personal and cultural empowerment that this university faces. But despite all the work that I put into that struggle, I'm really not sure at this point if that's the most challenging issue that we face here. Because after talking to so many administrators and faculty and staff, and even other student leaders, the most consistent response I got when I would mention my goals was a sort of half-smiled good luck, or a let us know how we can help, which to me easily translated into a sure, we'll see how far you can get. And perhaps that last one says more about me than it does about the people I was talking to, but there was this consistent feeling that what I was pursuing was somehow unrealistic. But why, when we consider activism, especially student activism, is it unrealistic to want to create a space that reflects your experience and to demand an education that respects it? And when we consider our campus at Texas State University and the countless universities across the US that serve as a testament to these rich white men who have done little more than simply be rich enough to pay to have their legacies literally cemented into the very foundation of our educational institutions, at what point do we earn the right to create our own legacies and define the context in which our history is taught. Now, to me, it's not just a simple issue that can be boiled down to something like courage or some other missing abstract resource. I think I'm talking about a deeper personal framework of empowerment. To me, it's about exercising this power that we all have to ask and to demand, and at a certain point, to just go ahead and do, not waiting for validation. So, when I first started talking about wanting to create a multicultural space on campus, I kept running into this idea that it was unrealistic. Initially, I wanted it to go in the LBJ Student Center because it was in the middle of campus and it's the easiest building for the most students to get to. But I quickly learned that there just wasn't enough space in this, for a multicultural lounge in this 5-story building that was supposedly designed for students. But when I approached these ideas, and they did eventually release a renovation plan that you can currently go and look at that includes the multicultural lounge, but it also includes a student fee increase, and it's not set for completion until the spring of 2019. And for me, this was especially frustrating because I'd gotten the idea for a multicultural lounge from the public universities in Texas and elsewhere that began putting these spaces together in the 60s and 70s. And I didn't really think of it as something that demanded a huge renovation project or even a construction team at all. To me, it was about shifting the way the space on campus was already organized to actually consider the unique experiences of students of color. And furthermore, it was about going to a school that valued its diverse student populations enough to proactively designate space for our cultural growth, empowerment, and safety. But that's not the school we go to. And so we do it ourselves. When I designed the Multicultural Lounge, I worked with that organization called the Pan-African Action Committee in the Honors College. And while it was a completely student-driven process, the Honors Administration provided this invaluable base of support, allowing us to repurpose what was once a sort of miscellaneous kitchen area into this lounge and an unused connected office into a Black students' resource library full of Black literature. And throughout this process, I was constantly reevaluating what it really meant for us as students to be designing multicultural space. I mean, we're a part of a Black student organization, so in a way, this is really for us, but it's also a part of a larger context. And I think that's really the point of establishing institutional space, because we have to know that it will exist long after we graduate and have left Texas State. And the students that use the space at a certain point will have no idea who we are, and they won't really care. But to me, that's the cool part, because that means that these conscious decisions that we make about art and literature, no matter how radical they may seem to us now, pretty soon will become just a normal part of the space. And so we get a special opportunity to redefine what is normal. And when we put posters on the wall of Dolores Huerta, a Chicana activist who organized immigrant workers and co-founded the United Farm Workers Union, or Fred Hampton, a young leader of the Black Panther Party in Chicago who united activists across color lines despite his untimely death, we get to add to their permanence in this more general context of history. And we get to circumvent some of the white supremacy that is inherent to our campuses like Texas State and recontextualize this history and these experiences that have been deemed unimportant. And I mean, the only place on campus that has the 4 women who integrated our school, the only picture of them together is in our library. But about 1/4 of the first floor of our student center is dedicated to George Strait. He's a country singer. But it's important to remember, though, that we're allowed to do this. We're allowed to make space for ourselves when there is none. And we're allowed to demand that our university or workplaces or wherever we are, we're allowed to demand that they address our issues directly. Because so much work has gone into making us feel powerless. When we are facing this oppression that has made itself a part of our everyday lives, the spaces that we don't feel welcome in, the history that we've been left out of, the economic and environmental violence that we encounter on a daily basis. But too many feel like these larger national movements are the only avenues for meaningful revolutionary change. But what about that everyday oppression? I really think that we do have this power to make a difference, but the national platform is not the only stage. I mean, just consider the people who have really made a difference to you. For me, it's teachers that strayed from the curriculum. It's parents that made me read before bed. It's administrators that shared ideas and opportunities rather than emptied out statements of skeptical hope. It's friends who said, "Let's keep going," even when I could have sworn I was done. And that's just the people that I've met. There are countless people that we've never even heard of that have changed our whole world and created our normal. And you have that power. You just might not be using it. And so when we opened the Multicultural Lounge, hundreds of students and administrators and faculty and community members filled this relatively small space. And I remember that when we were working on it, I really felt like at certain points, the only people who cared whether or not we finished were the people that were working. That especially at those points when it felt really small and tedious, it just seemed like it didn't matter. But seeing all these people that came to the space to let us know that this is where they would study and hang out and meet, because we had created a space for them, it really helped me realize that it was a part of this larger framework, that that we were a part of this gradual change that I hope that we're all beginning to take on. And because I know it can be really scary 10 months in, especially for some of us, 10 months into a Trump presidency, to do anything at all. I know. But the thing is, you don't have to do everything. But you should do something. Thank you.